The desert wind howled like it knew a secret nobody else did, and right there on that empty highway, a red Ferrari sat lifeless under the blazing sun. And standing beside it was a millionaire who looked more lost than he ever had in his entire life. Now picture this with me for a second, because this is where things get strange. A little girl, no older than 7, barefoot and dusty, walked straight toward him without fear. She tugged lightly on his sleeve, like she had all the answers he desperately needed. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more confidence than anything else around. She said something that made him freeze in place, completely stunned and confused. "My dad can fix it," she whispered, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And just like that, the silence of the desert became something much heavier. Because what happened next, well, nobody there would ever forget it again. You see, this wasn't just any man stranded in the middle of nowhere. This was a self-made millionaire who built his empire from nothing but ambition and grit. He was used to solving problems with a phone call, money, or sheer authority. But out here, none of that mattered, not even a little bit. No signal, no help, no passing cars, just endless sand and rising frustration. His Ferrari, the symbol of his success, had suddenly become a useless piece of metal. He kicked the tire in anger, something he hadn't done in years. Because for the first time in a long time, he felt completely powerless. And then that little girl appeared, like a quiet answer to a loud problem. And somehow, her calmness unsettled him more than the situation itself. Now stay with me here, because this is where curiosity starts pulling you in. The girl didn't look worried, didn't look impressed, didn't even look surprised. She just stood there, staring at the car like she'd seen this before. Her clothes were simple, worn, and covered in dust from the dry land around them. But her eyes had a kind of certainty you couldn't ignore. The millionaire crouched down, trying to understand what she meant exactly. "Your dad?" he asked, raising an eyebrow, half confused and half desperate. She nodded slowly, like she had no doubt in her words at all. "He fixes everything," she said again, this time with a small smile. And somehow, that simple sentence made him hesitate before dismissing her. You know how sometimes you hear something so simple, yet it sticks with you? That's exactly what happened to him right there in the middle of nowhere. He looked around, expecting to see someone nearby, but there was nobody else. No house, no workshop, nothing but miles of empty desert stretching endlessly. "Where is he?" the millionaire finally asked, his voice softer now. The girl pointed toward a distant hill, barely visible through the heat waves. "He's there," she said, like it was just a short walk away. Now most people would laugh this off and ignore her completely. But something about her confidence made him think twice before deciding anything. And deep down, he knew he didn't have many options left anyway. So he made a choice that he would never have imagined making before. He followed the little girl across the dry land, leaving his Ferrari behind. Each step felt strange, like he was stepping out of his own world entirely. The heat pressed down on him, making every movement slower and heavier. But the girl walked ahead easily, like she belonged to this harsh environment. She didn't complain, didn't stop, didn't even look back to check on him. It was as if she already knew he would follow without question. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to trust her in a way. Not because it made sense, but because nothing else did anymore. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change the direction of everything. As they walked, the millionaire couldn't stop thinking about his own life. All the deals, all the success, all the control he once had over everything. Yet here he was, walking behind a child, hoping her words were true. It felt almost unreal, like something out of a story he wouldn't believe. He tried to ask more questions, but she answered only when necessary. "My dad works with his hands," she said at one point, proudly. "He doesn't need machines like yours to understand how things work." That line hit him harder than he expected, deep somewhere inside. Because for years, he relied only on systems, technology, and convenience. And maybe, just maybe, he had forgotten something important along the way. Finally, they reached a small, hidden area behind the hill she pointed toward. there stood a simple shack, built from old wood and pieces of scrap metal. It wasn't impressive, not even close to the world he came from. But there was something solid about it, something real and grounded. The girl ran ahead and pushed the door open without hesitation. "Dad," she called out, her voice now full of excitement and urgency. A man stepped out, wiping his hands on a cloth stained with grease. He looked at the millionaire calmly, without surprise or curiosity at all. Almost like he already knew why they were there before a word was spoken. And that quiet confidence filled the air with something unexpectedly powerful. The millionaire explained his situation, expecting skepticism or at least hesitation. But the man just listened, nodding slightly as if confirming what he already understood. "Bring me to it," he said simply, picking up a small set of tools. No drama, no big promises, just quiet assurance in his voice. The millionaire hesitated for a moment, then agreed without arguing further. They walked back together, this time with a strange sense of purpose. The girl followed behind them, smiling like everything was already solved. And for the first time, the millionaire felt a small flicker of hope. Not because of the tools, not because of logic, but because of trust. And trust was something he hadn't relied on in a very long time. When they reached the Ferrari again, the man didn't rush or panic. He simply walked around the car, observing it like a puzzle to solve. He listened to the engine, touched the metal, and checked every detail carefully. The millionaire watched closely, expecting complicated equipment or advanced methods. But instead, the man worked with patience, precision, and deep understanding. Minutes passed, then more, until finally, he stepped back with a nod. "Try now," he said, as if it was already done. The millionaire turned the key, half expecting another failure. But the engine roared back to life, smooth and powerful as ever. And just like that, everything changed in a single moment. Now imagine how that must have felt right then and there. A problem money couldn't solve had just been fixed with simple skill. The millionaire sat there, stunned, trying to process what just happened. He stepped out of the car, looking at the man with genuine respect. "How much do I owe you?" he asked, reaching for his wallet immediately. But the man shook his head, refusing without even thinking twice. "Help someone else when they need it," he replied calmly. That answer hit deeper than any price ever could have. Because it wasn't about money, it never was from the beginning. It was about something far more valuable and often forgotten. The little girl stood beside her father, smiling proudly at what he had done. "My dad fixes everything," she repeated, this time with even more meaning. And now, the millionaire finally understood what she truly meant. It wasn't just about cars or machines or broken things in general. It was about people, trust, kindness, and showing up when it matters most. Something he had overlooked while chasing success all those years. He nodded slowly, realizing this moment would stay with him forever. Because sometimes, the biggest lessons come from the smallest voices. And sometimes, they arrive when you least expect them to. Right in the middle of nowhere, where everything else falls silent. As he drove away, the road didn't feel as empty anymore. Something inside him had shifted, something he couldn't ignore now. The Ferrari still roared beneath him, but it didn't feel the same. It was no longer just a symbol of success, but a reminder of humility. He glanced back once, seeing the girl and her father growing distant. Yet their impact stayed closer than anything he had ever known. And for the first time in years, he felt something real again. Not power, not control, but connection and understanding. The kind that doesn't come with money or status. The kind you only learn when life forces you to listen. So let me ask you something, because this story isn't just about him. How often do we overlook simple truths because they seem too small? How often do we think only money or power can solve our problems? And how often do we forget the value of people who work quietly? That little girl didn't see a millionaire, she saw someone who needed help. And her father didn't see a broken car, he saw a problem to solve. No judgment, no ego, just action and understanding. And maybe that's something we could all learn from today. Because life has a way of humbling even the strongest among us. And sometimes, that's exactly what we need to grow. If this story made you think, or maybe even feel something different today, then go ahead and hit that like button because it really helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more stories like this that stay with you long after they end. And I want to hear from you in the comments, what part hit you the most? Would you have followed the little girl into the desert like he did? Or would you have stayed back, trusting only what you already knew? Share your thoughts, because your perspective adds to this journey. And who knows, your comment might inspire the next story we tell here. Until then, stay curious, stay grounded, and never ignore the quiet voices. Because sometimes, they carry the loudest truths you'll ever hear.